You're listening to Parasearch UK Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch UK Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to The Spirit Dimension with your host, Kerry Greenaway, right here on Parasearch Radio.
Good evening and welcome to the Spirit Dimension. My name is Kerry Greenaway and on a Sunday I like to bring you something a little different. Now tonight I was supposed to have Dr. Cal Cooper in the studio with me, but he's done his typical professor thing and completely forgotten about it. So I have dragged a friend of mine into the studio, Mr. Ashley Knibb. Good evening, Ashley. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Hello.
Caught you on the fly, didn't I?
I think I've been set up here big time.
No, you haven't.
Okay then.
Anyway, you set me a little task this week, didn't you?
Kind of, yeah. Well, not such a task, more an idea, I suppose.
Yeah, a little idea.
Something to look into.
Yes, it was something to look into, most definitely. Do you want to share with the audience what this was?
No, not really. No. Because I know some of the things that you've been looking into yourself, which I'm sure you'll explain. I just mentioned to you the possibility of looking into something called the holographic universe or holographic mind.
Yeah,
which is
very interesting. It's a theory, but it's actually a mathematically booted up kind of theory, backed up by actual physicists. We're not just talking about woo-woo people. We're talking about scientific can't say this word at times. Physicists, aren't we?
Yeah, in the quantum world. So we're talking about M theory and string theory.
That's right. Can you explain what string theory is?
Wow.
It's a biggie. This is a biggie, guys. This is like, we're not physicists. I would just like to point this out.
No, I couldn't really describe it properly because I always think I get it wrong. Is it the very simple? Is it in the basically the whole universal structure is made up of these vibrational strings or something? That's
right.
And they all interlink and stuff like that. So and that's what helps create reality or matter and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not a physicist. And
So we are layman terming this. I would just like to say this. We are layman terming this for normal people who don't understand all the maths, because this is backed up between maths. Now, Professor Brian Cox said it's a bit like when you look at a vineyard, right? So it all looks very ordered and very perfectly synchronized and everything like that. But when you get up close, it looks very muddled and gnarly, and the vines are all intertwined. And that's effectively what the string theory is, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I mean, like I said, no expert, but yeah, kind of think it's like that, yeah.
But then they've taken it a step further with the holographic universal theory, haven't they? So you go deeper into the vine and it becomes more ordered again.
Yeah, but also, if I get it right, I mean, I'm not entirely... The pinnacle part of it is the fact that we have governance over the reality we live in. if that makes sense. And you explained it better the other night, actually, to be fair, when we was chatting about this. About fundamentally, it's about information opposed to numbers and stuff like that. Everything's made up of information, and that information is what did you say about it being reflected back into the universe and stuff like that?
Okay, so basically, there was a theory that Stephen Hawking put out there that basically if information, they looked at it in regards to a black hole to start with, because they believed that information that went into a black hole disappeared, but that went against all the other physicists' perspective of information doesn't disappear; it goes somewhere. So what they worked out, very scientifically and mathematically, was that it doesn't disappear. What it does, it gets imprinted onto the side of the black hole. They don't know where it goes through a black hole, but they've worked out that what happens is the black hole doesn't just absorb it and the information goes into the ether somewhere. It gets imprinted onto the sides of the black hole, which actually effectively makes the black hole bigger. And then they took that a step further and went to the boundaries of the universe, where all information, past, present and future, because time is only a perception, gets imprinted in a 2D format on the boundary of the universe. That in reality is then reflected back in a 3D, 4D world, which is the world we live in today.
Yes.
So effectively, you've got two reflections going on in different dimensions of everything that's ever happened, past, present and future.
Yeah, well, so everything's happening at the same time. But although you shouldn't really say at the same time, because I'm guessing that kind of confused these things a little bit more, doesn't it?
It kind of does, but it kind of is, though.
Everything is happening all at the same time. Because of this reflection and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so that's yeah. So when you think about what's happened 30 years ago, that's happening now, and what's happening 30 years in the future is still happening now, and obviously what we're doing now is still happening now. So past, present, future occurs simultaneously rather than in a linear, sequential manner like we understand time to be.
Yeah, exactly. Now this makes things very, very interesting, because effectively we talk about things like the Akashic records.
Yes, yeah.
Which, how many times have we explained the Akashic records as a record of everything that has ever been, ever will be, and will ever has happened, will happen, and will happen in the future?
Yep.
There's a record of that out there somewhere. So this becomes very exciting from a spiritualist perspective.
Yeah, because it's almost like saying, it's almost like giving a scientific realization, that's probably the best way to put it, of that spiritual understanding of the Akashic records. Because as you just said, the Akashic records is supposed to be this place that exists where all information, and I'm going to use information now rather than information relating to events and things that have happened in the past, happen now and in the future, are all documented. So effectively, you could get access to these. You could then understand what happened in the past, what's going to happen in the future, and all this kind of stuff. And that ties in exactly to, well, not exactly, it ties in a similar fashion to how I understand, and I'm guessing how you understand this holographic universal theory thing to be as well. So all of a sudden you've got similes between quantum physics and science and all that kind of stuff with spirituality. Right.
So, and this is everything we see, feel, hear in a 3D perception. What we know as our reality is, and this includes our perception of time. This is the incredible piece. Time is a perception, right? So everything we perceive is actually emanating backwards and forwards from this 2D field. So then the question was asked, how is this transmitted? How is this information being transmitted from this 2D to this 3D reality that we live in, from this 2D imprintation to this 3D reality? How is this being transmitted? And they theorise that it's the white noise. You know, that static that we use, that white noise that they hear from space and that we tune into for communications with the other side, right? This has been left over from, well, they say it's been left over from the Big Bang Theory. When the universe was created. So this white noise that's been left over from the Big Bang could, in theory, be what's able to transmit this information.
Yes, this is the theories that I've seen pop up about there being a sound in space rather than not being a sound in space. There's actually a background noise. Is that what you're?
Yeah.
So that, and as that fits in with what we call white noise and stuff like that, or at least similarity in frequencies, perhaps, then that is exciting because it means that is there similarities in between these things, and if that's the case, that means that perhaps what we've been looking at in a spiritual kind of approach, if you like, is actually now backed up by science again. And so, but then from my perspective, does that mean that we're not looking for the right things, or we're looking at something and thinking it's something that it's not, so to speak?
Exactly. So it twists our perception on what it is. What are we actually searching for now then as ghost hunters? Are we actually not searching for a ghost? We're actually searching for information that's being transmitted from this 2D dimension.
Is good question. I think that one always drops. What we individually are searching for often falls into our own belief system anyway. We look at that because of what we believe we want to find anyway. Me personally, I try to remain open mind. So when things like this come along, it's quite, as you said, it's quite exciting because it's like, okay, so the source, as I've called it in the past as well, and a number of that, the source may not be the spirit or the or someone who's passed over, but it could be the reflection or audio or what you want to call it of a past event or even a future event that hasn't happened yet. So we could even be, in some circumstances, we could even be picking up information about ourselves that are there 2 minutes in the future. So we could. Seems quite annoying because we could actually be searching for ourselves in a weird way.
Yeah, exactly. You're getting telepathic messages from yourself from the future. But again, remember,
not an impossibility.
Time is actually the perception, and it has no relevance really in this. That's the key point of this.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, that's where it gets this is where you get into. The thing you got annoyed with earlier in the week was it's just another theory and another theory. Unfortunately, it will always be another theory until proven. But this is going to be a difficult one to prove, although they're having a good go at it mathematically, I suppose, in quantum physics. But we're not going to prove it in a paranormal kind of sense of the word, because obviously I don't think that's the way it's going to work, if that makes sense.
I think it's a hard enough job being a physicist. I don't think a little old paranormal investigator is going to be able to achieve this. And it's not like you can go there to the boundary of the universe and go, oh yeah, look, there it is, 2D. Everything's 2D. But think of it like a cinema. This is how I had to get it in my head, because I get concepts, but I have to simplify them, and I have to put them in terms that I understand it, being as I'm not particularly scientifically minded. So when I was looking at this theory, I listened to a lot of different physicists speaking about it. I read quite a lot of theses about it, got lost in a lot of jargon. But basically, my understanding of it was think of it like a massive cinema screen with all the information, past, present and future, imprinted onto this screen. And like you would go and see a 3D film, images and information and sounds and stuff like that is coming out of this 2D world and coming into our 3D world, which is why we're able to experience it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's very simplified, and a scientist or physicist would probably be cringing at that analogy, but that's very, very simplified. But they're actually able. What's incredibly exciting is that they are backing this up with maths. I mean, I dread to think what the equations look like, but but it's kind of fitting in gaps that other theories weren't fitting. I mean, they were talking about Einstein's theory of gravity, weren't they? And saying that it worked in certain fields, but in one particular field it wasn't working. Or theory of relativity, I think it was.
Yeah, relative. I think it's very relatively old. I think it's because this is obviously we're getting into the realms of what we used to call entanglement, but also what he originally dubbed as being spooky action at a distance, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So and that's where elements of this will come into place, and it's like obviously where you see entanglement or spooky action at a distance, rather than be two things affected by one, it could actually be a reflection of the other.
Yeah.
Is that that's where you're trying to go with that, then, is it?
Yeah, but there were gaps in his theory of relativity where his equational workings out wasn't fitting, but this theory that they've worked out actually fits his theory of relativity as well as other theories. So it's kind of filling the gaps. That's what makes it so exciting.
For physicists and quantum physicists.
I kind of started to think, maybe there's an inner little quantum physicist inside me here. Because I was getting excited about this stuff.
It is quite exciting when you think about it, because it is getting close to hopefully getting closer, should I put it that way, to the understanding of the fundamentals of the universe, isn't it, and stuff like that. So it's not. It's a big thing, not a little thing.
Exactly, so, and it's theories that actual physicists aren't going to argue with. They may argue it from a physicist perspective, but they're not going to argue with some of the massive names, like, what was it, Leonard Susskind or something? What was his name? People like that. And massive figures like Stephen Hawking, who changed his mind in the end. There was a big wrangle in the physicist world over this. And then Stephen Hawking actually changed his mind on this and actually came round to this theory idea himself. And people are really getting quite excited about this. And I think from a paranormal perspective, it's something that's definitely worth considering.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you mentioned like Hawkins. I think in his late years, and don't quote me on this because I'm not 100% sure, but I've got a funny feeling that he wrote a paper on what you mentioned earlier on about the information escaping black holes, and that was one of the things he wrote. And that's probably when he started turning. He's also changing his mind against it, sort of thing. And obviously, he's one of the fundamental people when it comes to black holes and stuff like that, with these Hawkins radiation and all that kind of stuff.
Could you imagine that conversation, Ashley? All those physicists in a room arguing out a theory. I mean, God, it gets quite heated amongst the paranormal world with theories, let alone physicists.
It would be. Do you know what? It's one of those things that I'd like to be a fly on the wall for, because I always imagine it to be similar to how some of us discuss our theories when we get in a little, Skype groups or somewhere and chat about things. I always imagine them being kind of similar. In the smaller groups, I mean, not bigger. I mean, obviously they write papers and stuff like that, and backwards and forwards via journals and stuff like that. It's always been out there. But yeah, I'm sure. I'm assuming there should be some little groups somewhere along the line that have like chats backwards and forwards and stuff like that. And I wonder if they do it using like social media or something like that in order to. No, my post on bigger than your post.
You're wrong. Yeah, wait, Hawkins, you're wrong. Prove it. Okay, I'll come up with a massive equation that no one will ever understand apart from a physicist. That proves your theory wrong. It's kind of more how it goes than just you're a twat.
It's kind of odd, isn't it? When you think about it, and all that stuff written like on a wall, like in a film or something like that, you think actually they do that, because some of the equations are actually that long and go that deep.
Yeah.
So it is. I always find things like this fascinating to think about, because it is thinking outside the box so much that it's like, and then it's not trying. I mean, often people get accused of trying to fit quantum physics or sciencey stuff into the paranormal in order to try and explain it. And I get that, and yes, it doesn't always explain it, and it's not 100% exact and all that kind of stuff. But there are, especially quantum physics, from what I've read, and again, it's layman's terms. I'm not an expert or anything like that. Would never claim to be. But when you read it, I mean, I read a really good book about some of the history of quantum physics and stuff like that, and how it came up by Frank Close, called the Infinity Puzzle. And some of the bits of that book, as you're reading through it, you're like, yeah, but that sounds just like the paranormal. And it's just like, yes, you've used a few different words, and some of them quite big, but it is what you're describing there sounds like an event or something that's quite similar to a paranormal event. So,
I mean, even Tesla, when we go back in the day, Tesla said think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And basically, what this white noise thing is that's left over from the Big Bang wouldn't be a noise like from a spirit box type noise. It would be an energy frequency thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so it'd be a frequency and a vibration in effect, because obviously that's how sounds are made and stuff like that. So you'd get, and then obviously in order to create that, you've got the energy as well. So he's right. I don't disagree with that. I think that's one of Tesla's great quotes, isn't it? Actually, to be fair. So I think Yeah, I think that's a distinct possibility that he could be onto something there. Well, he was onto something, wasn't he?
Well, he's onto a hell of a lot, was our Tesla. A person I've been meaning to look into for a donkey's years. And I feel like I need to look into his work a little bit more now.
I think it's worth doing because I was thinking about this. I was watching TV the other night, and I saw an advert for a phone. I can't remember what phone it is. I won't say what phone it is because it's obviously not an advertising system. But basically, the phone in the advert, they put the phones back to back, and it shows about wireless charging.
Yes.
Between two phones. Now, I'm pretty sure, and I've got a funny feeling I've read somewhere about Tesla coming up with ideas about wireless, about transmitting electricity or power or energy wirelessly between 2 points. So it's almost like, well, he obviously was looking into that and trying to make it more widespread. But now we're getting into that point. Now we're actually using it for devices and stuff like that.
Isn't that like when you see like the lightning coils though? You see electricity being transmitted between two Tesla coils, effectively wirelessly, isn't it?
Well, effectively, I think that's more of a reaction because it's arcing, the electricity is arcing from one to the other. But I expect it could. I mean, there's still energy boosted in that, so it could use that same principle in order to make it work. But obviously, you need to make it a little bit safer and finer. And obviously, now they've started to do that with the phones. Yeah. So, I mean, electrical devices like that, phones and computers and stuff only work on a really small amount of energy anyway. So, but obviously, if they can do that, then that's they're already starting to move things forward. Imagine if they could do that with proper amounts of power and that, like I said, to power your house, power a business, to power a vehicle of some kind and stuff like that. All of a sudden, you've got an exponential change that obviously he had thought about years and years ago.
He died before he could move it that far forward, as it were, or maybe he was limited with the technology and the components he had at the time. Whereas now we've moved on that further. They've taken concepts from that experimentation work that he was doing and actually moved it forward because we have got the technology now that we didn't have back then, or he didn't have back then. Could you imagine? Could you imagine what he would be doing now with the technology that's around now?
Well, he'd be in his element now, wouldn't he? Because I mean, back then the technology had to be so big to achieve the things that he could achieve now with smaller pieces. He could sit in a smaller environment with cheaper pieces of kit and all that kind of stuff, and achieve more about what he's doing. Whereas back then he had to have lots of investment and all that kind of stuff to buy the big pieces of kit and all that kind of stuff in order to get what he needed to get done. So if he'd been around now, he would have been a lot better off because he'd have a lot more investment. And obviously, with the fundamentals of mobile technology and all that kind of stuff, he'd be well into it because that's also another thing that he thought was a good thing as well. So.
Yeah, thank you, Kit, in the chat room, by the way. He's just shared a link for me about Wardenclyffe Tower, also known as the Tesla Tower, which was an early experimental wireless transmission station that was actually built by Nikola Tesla in New York. That was intended, I'm reading this, by the way, off of the link that you sent me, that was intended to transmit messages, telephony and facsimile images across the Atlantic to England. So he was working on these concepts.
And now we do it, I mean, rather than sending it across the ocean, or we've got obviously huge pipes that go across there, but we've also got satellite transmission and all that kind of stuff. So effectively, we have done what we thought was going to happen. So
exactly. So when you start looking at it from, we started off talking about the holographic universal theory. When you start looking at these concepts and you're working in the paranormal, it's really important to start looking at what these people are actually doing. And this has nothing to do with the paranormal field. This is a physicist world. You know what I mean? This is out of our remit, I suppose, as it was. But it opens up the door. It makes you think about what it is. And we talk a little bit about the stone tape theory. What if it's just images transmitted from this 2D holographic universe?
Yeah, well, I'm not a fan of the stone tape theory.
I know you're not. I know you don't like this theory.
Because of all the theories that are theories out there, this is not a theory as well, as far as I can understand. It's not there are theories or ideas that probably spawned it, but the actual theory of the name comes out of a TV series from the 70s, doesn't it?
Yes.
So, but if you go further back, I think people like Oliver Lodge and stuff like that had ideas that were similar to the idea of the stone tape theory anyway. So it is an idea that went back, but I just don't. I think, if I remember rightly, having discussions, funnily enough, with people in science and stuff like that, the energy required to imprint information onto a physical item, matter, stone, whatever you want to call it, would be needed would be it's so great that it almost needs to have some kind of like nuclear explosion, if you like, for it to happen. Apparently, so which makes it now that's under our understanding at the moment of things and all that kind of stuff, obviously. And obviously, the argument that comes off the back of that is, well, it's not normal information based on that; it's emotional energy and all this kind of stuff. So, but I find it difficult. I say, okay, yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's us putting things in a perspective where we're at a location and we want to be finding the information that's relative to that location. So you immediately think that location must have the information stored in it. That's not necessarily important at all. No. We live in an environment today where we've got information stored in the cloud, so to speak. And the cloud, obviously, all of our devices and that connects up to the cloud. And although we call it the cloud, all these devices actually connect to servers and stuff like that are probably in cold rooms that are probably underground or in some building somewhere. So it's in a physical location that's not relative to where we are. It's, it's away from where we are. Now you put that into perspective, that means that we can gain information from different points with the technology we've got already today. So if we can get it from our minds, telepathy-wise, whatever like that, like you said, it could either be information that's just floating through the ether because it's being knocked back from this sort of like this in this holographic universe kind of scenario. So we're picking up on it and then interpreting it in a certain way that's relative to where we are. Or it could be information that we're linking to somehow from somewhere else and gaining it that way. So it's gone off on one, haven't I?
Well, it's because there's fundamental issues with the stone tape thing just in itself. I mean, like you say, first of all, the energy it's going to take to actually record something onto, if you want to look at it in a crystal way, everyone goes, oh, it's the crystals or it's the geological formations in the area. The power it's going to take is going to be phenomenal. So how do things get recorded? What gets recorded and what doesn't? Because by going on the stone tape, if you've got this explosion, everything should be recorded at that point in time, not just an image of a person or an event, like I'm thinking of a battleground or something like that. It would be everything that happened at that moment in that location.
There is one thing that does record everything, and that's our unconscious mind.
But that doesn't mean it's going to get imprinted onto the location.
No, definitely not. But it means that it's accessible from somewhere else.
Right.
Or,
so how does...
Or just to throw one more into that, if the universe is also conscious, then maybe that records everything.
Did say it was talking theories, everybody. How does it get preserved? That's the other thing. And then how does it get played back? What's that trigger that would make it play back? So those are the fundamental issues with the stone tape theory. So before you even start talking stone tape, you have to start breaking it down and start working out answers to those 4 questions initially before you can even start thinking stone tape theory, right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And we are thinking of that in regards to earthbound 3D reality. What is in the environment that allows those conditions to take place?
Exactly, yeah. Still think about where well, it's not even earthbound, is it? It's location bound, where you're stood at that particular moment in time when it happens.
Exactly. So you have to start answering those questions before you start going, oh yeah, it's the stone tape theory. Because we can all bandy a theory out there, but you have to back your theories up.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right, well, at least physicists are doing that with mathematics.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah, which obviously mathematics they've proven to be working with other elements of quantum physics and physics. So you could argue that obviously that's a better way of backing it up and going, well, I think it's the stone tape theory. so that's a better way of backing things up. I mean, I forgot I was going to go with that now. I think part of the problem as well is I'm going to say it. Part of the problem is when we look at these situations, especially around the stone tape theory, it's very focused on that point in time and that point in space, as in the spooky haunted house overnight that you're investigating. Whereas I think we need to be zooming out a lot more in order to gain a better understanding of what's going on. And obviously the holographic universe is obviously massively zooming out because you're going right to the boundaries of space and time in order to get it knocked back on each other. So I think that's why I like things like this, about the holographic universe one, rather than the stone tape theory kind of one. And like you said, because there's mathematics involved and that kind of stuff that says, okay, this is a thing because now we can say we can balance the equations and all this kind of stuff using what we already know, opposed to something that's a possibility or probability. Possibility, not probable. No, an idea.
Yeah, but I agree, because what you have to do is, with any theory, you have to distill it down to questions. So you don't just take it on blind faith. You don't just go, oh, it must be the stone tape theory. Know what the stone tape, I'm just using that as an example, is the same as knowing what your equipment's recording, essentially, isn't it? It's what are you recording? Why is it important that we record that? Why does EMF, why do people say that EMF is a ghost if we have an anomaly? Can't say that word either. But it's questioning more, isn't it? And building up data. Now, we've talked about building up data before in regards to investigations, because that's actually quite integral in regards to bringing some fields together. Because if we've got data and we can go to physicists or psychologists or people with data, they're going to be, great, we've got a database of data here. We could maybe see some patterns there that we may not have seen before, might fit in with theories that we're working on.
That's exactly right. They'll look at the data in order to understand where the patterns are, and that's what they look for to begin with. Scientists and stuff like that, the environment and all that kind of variables, all those kind of things. You can't just go and we look at parapsychologists and things like that, and psychologists and science people will look at anomalies and all that kind of stuff in the form of anecdotal evidence, as in the stories that people tell about what happened. But they won't take one or two or three. They'll take hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of them in order to gain up an understanding. Dr. Ian Stevenson, who's done he done about I can't remember what he done now. He studied children from different parts of the world that had experiences of reincarnation. That's it. And he put together thousands upon thousands upon thousands of these cases in order to gain an understanding and show different bits of it. And off that work, he realised that in some cases, that's not every case, but in some cases, these children that claim to have had reincarnation have the information, but also could have things like mold or something on their body where the person they said they've been reincarnated from also had an injury. So there was things like that transferred forward. So, but he only understood this by looking at thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of cases, and in order to prove that as a possibility still. So in order for us to understand things a bit more, we need millions of points of data, basically. So all these and that information, not just the anecdotal data of the experiences, but also the readings of what's happening, the EMF readings, the temperature anything that might give us some kind of understanding that we could then cross-reference across all of them in order to gain some kind of pattern that's happening. I mean, when they look for things like you mentioned right at the top of the show about black holes and things like that, I think they looked for them for years upon years because you can't see a black hole with your own eyes. You have to look for various kind of forms of data in order to find the patterns to show that there's a change in gravitational fields and stuff like that in order to see that there is a black hole there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it takes time, effort, and lots of data in order to get to these places, and that's what they, like you said, that's what they love, the data.
Love the data. Now, going on to the black hole thing, unfortunately, media feeds you an image. You expect to, if you was able to travel through space, you kind of would expect to just see a big hole that's everything's being sucked into, and you know, it's a physical, something you can physically see. But we can't do that.
No, I don't. I mean, obviously, depending on what's being sucked into the black hole, you might see bits and pieces of gases and all that kind of stuff, or debris and stuff like that. But if there's nothing around it, then I think you wouldn't see with your own eyes anything particularly interesting.
In exactly the same way as you wouldn't see this 2D informational imprinting on the boundaries of the universe, like a cinema screen. You're not going to go, oh look, there was a dinosaur doing that back in there. Do you know what I mean? You're not. It's not something you're going to be able to physically, tangibly see with your own two eyes.
No, not at all. No, it'd be because what they're talking about is not a picture that you're going to. It's the information that's bouncing backwards and forwards, sort of thing. And if we think about computers, if you break information down on a computer, you break it all the way down to ones and zeros that not very many people understand, apart from people that understand computers. So it's and to be fair, ones and zeros in computers are basically a switch. It's on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off, sort of thing. So information, how it looks, or you won't see what it looks like. It'll only be understood as information and interpreted in such a fashion. Which is why, in my theory, if you go back to your stone tape theory, if that information presents itself at a location at a certain time, you might just be lucky to pick up on certain things that then give you the ability to interpret certain things, and that interpretation could then be an image or a smell or a sound or something like that, which obviously then transports into us having a paranormal experience.
I get quite excited about it. I know, we're going to the universe and back tonight. But this is why I think it's really important to keep reading, keep open-minded, look at various theories, don't dismiss them. You know what I mean? Look at that cosmological programs as much as you do your ghost hunting programs. Look at, history and stuff like that. See where our influences are coming from. I mean, it's so incredible sometimes where the most unlikely area will throw up a whole line of a rabbit hole. We call them rabbit holes when we do research, because we'll sit there and do research. It will take you down a rabbit hole and take you in a completely different area. And how many times have I said the paranormal field is not just about ghosts and spirits and the woo-woo. It's about the science, actually. It's about the physics. The physics. I keep getting my physics and my physicists muddled up. It's about that field. It's about biology, sociology, cultural. There are so many factors in regards to the paranormal. When we looked at pareidolia, we found out how unreliable actually how our ears and our eyes were in regards to the biological state. Yeah. We think that they're infallible almost. Yes, we know that as we get older our hearing deteriorates, but I was shocked to learn that some of the mists you see in the dark are actually caused by the eye trying to get used to the dark. It's not actually a mist you're seeing, it's actually something that's being created by the eye. And people
it's trying to focus, isn't it? Yeah.
It's that trying to focus. So people are seeing that and going, I had an experience, I had a green mist that came through the room. Did everyone see that? That's actually an eye thing. It's not a ghosty thing. It's an eye thing.
Yeah. And you can get there's certain things you can get that's wrong with your eyes, where you can see certain things like specks of light and stuff like that float in your vision that you think you're seeing in front of you, but they're actually through your eyes. There's other things like undetectable vibrations that you can't detect with your own body, but they'll vibrate at a certain frequency, back to frequencies and vibrations again, that they'll do things with your retina so that you think you're actually seeing things that aren't there as well. There's all kinds of weird and wonderful things out there that makes our senses, our five senses, I don't know if I get it right, because we talk about having an extra sense all the time. I always get numbers wrong, but it makes our primary senses, there you go, get out of it now, it makes our primary senses not as reliable as what we think. I mean, we always, this is the bit I always get with the paranormal as well, which always makes me not laugh so much, but it does give me a slight touch of me. Because I saw it with my own eyes. Mm-hmm. I could not be mistaken. But obviously we can be mistaken. I've seen things and I still sit points sit there and go, I can't categorically say that I saw something and what I saw was this, because in my mind it's, well, I saw something, but it could have been triggered by all kind of number of things. And to be honest with you, I don't know what I saw, even though I think I know what I saw. I don't know what I saw because I haven't got any other evidence to back it up. I had an experience, and that's as much as I can talk about. Yeah. If that makes sense.
That's right. And even down to memory, we've worked out how infallible memory can be as well. And how your mind will invent things or not invent things, but false memory.
No, it does invent things. You're actually 100% right. It fills the gaps as well. If we have memories of certain things or experiences and stuff like that, it will fill gaps where we think we are with experiences we already understood. And people can understand that they had a certain thing happen to them, but actually that might never have happened to them at all. So our memory is a pain in the backside, to be honest with you, because it's and the only way, which is why when the police do investigations, this is why they'll take witness statements from numerous people from numerous points of view and then cross-reference those to find what the facts are, and then rule out the rest of it. And this is what we should. It was mentioned in the guidance note in the SPR, wasn't it, about doing many witness statements and cross-references and stuff like that. So it's important to do that kind of approach, I think, as well. You can't just go in on one statement, because that's just not enough. Although I have done it in the past.
But sometimes, if it's a personal experience, that's all you've got.
Yeah, that's your starting point, and then you have to build from there. And you always have to build from it, and that's the important bit. We both had probably other people in the chat room have probably had personal experiences, and you're categorically understanding what you had yourself and know that and could repeat it probably time and time and time again. But you're still unsure of what that source of that information was that caused you to have that experience in the first place. and that's what we need to get to. We need to understand the source of the information, opposed to the experience and itself.
Which kind of leads us right back to where we started this conversation.
Spiral.
And this is where your rabbit holes go.
It's a wibbly wobbly timey thing.
It's a wibbly wobbly timey wimey thing, right, guys? I love that quote. I sent it to Ashley today, actually, because it was like, forget time. Just remember, forget the time thing. And I was like, oh God, it's a wibbly wobbly timey wimey thing. And I have to say, one of the most concepts that I really do have trouble getting my head around, or theories that I have getting my head around, is entanglement. And time leaps and loops and stuff. It's one of those that it goes in my brain like a spaghetti ball. Do you know what I mean? And I can't get it to an understandable... Like I say, I have to get things in an understandable way. When Ashley and I have spoken together about various concepts, and trust me, we've had some quite in-depth conversations, one of them being Schrodinger's box, and the infinite monkeys was another one we had, which I
damn
still...
those monkeys.
Damn the monkeys. I still can't get my head around that one. But this is what I have trouble with entanglement. It is such a complicated concept in a way. And because I need to simplify, it's not easily done.
No, and I'm no expert, so but from what I understand, if you put, I can't even know what it is. It's not an electron or something, but it's to do with spin, basically. If one does one thing, the other will do it the opposite direction and stuff like that, won't it? Basically, yeah. And that's what we understand about entanglement at the moment. But then that could also mean, if that can happen at that, I can't remember it's called microcosmic level, quantum level, whatever you want to call it. If it can happen at that level, then there is a possibility that it could scale up into the macro level to our level. And there could be elements of that could happen there. So, obviously that's yet to be proven, but that could be interesting. If it could be proven, that could be an understanding of what. But then that's also out of time, because the things happen instantaneously, and there's no room for transmission of information and stuff like that. As far as I understand, it just happens like that. But then that's our understanding of time again. It's because we're restricted to saying, well, there's no room for time. But then if you shrink right down, time becomes bigger again, doesn't it? Because two things at a smaller level obviously have a bigger time scale. So that's how I see it anyway. But it's taking time out of the equation is a really difficult one for humans, because we live our lives bound by time.
Yeah.
We get up in the morning at a certain time, we have breakfast and sort things out, go to work, do a day at work, most of us, and then by some schedule throughout the day, and that's just one day, we'll do certain things, and then that'll expand into a week, and that'll expand into a month, and that'll expand into a year, and then we'll be doing the same thing over and over and over again, rinse and repeat, which makes it really, really difficult for us when we turn around and say, try looking at time in a non-linear fashion. Everyone goes, whoa, no, sorry, can't do that. Because it's almost an impossible concept to have. Yeah. And but if you can get that out of the equation, it's really quite interesting. Because that's what I've done on my psi theory things, because that's when you bust it out of the box a little bit, and you're like, so if I take time out of that, what does that do? I mean, all of a sudden it makes lots more things possible. If you take space out of the equation as well, that makes even more things possible. And all of a sudden you get to a point where, hang on a minute, I can do pretty much whatever I like in this theory. And that's how I see a lot of things sometimes. But it's not easy to.
It's not an easy concept. But the only thing I would say is keep at it. You know what I mean? Keep reading, keep looking at concepts if they seem very complicated to start with. Keep looking at it. I mean, the amount of times the infinite monkey scenario has been discussed and looked at and discussed again, and I'm still trying to grasp the point, quite frankly, because that's the other thing. I need to have a point. What's the point of it? Do you know what I mean? There's all well and good coming up with theories or concepts or ideas, but what's the point? Why would anybody put infinite monkeys typing on infinite typewriters to prove that at some point somebody is going to, or some monkey between them all is going to come up with the works of Shakespeare? I just don't see the point in why you would even think that. So that's I think where I have problems is not the concept itself. It's what's the point? like the cat in the box. What's the point in putting a cat in a box? But I was thinking far too literal with that.
Yeah, poor cat. I mean, I wrote a blog about the Stranger's cat, but turned it into Stranger's ghost, where we used a haunted room in a haunted house, and basically before you walk into that room, you don't know what's in there. So when you walk into that room, because you've walked in there on, I don't know, April 1st, 2008, certain things then collapse in themselves to give you a certain understanding. But depending on when you walk in there and what your belief system is and that kind of stuff, that's when you might get ghosts and stuff like that, because not everything might have collapsed into that time frame, if that makes sense. And that's how I kind of began to saw sort of like how Schrodinger's cat could like fall into the understanding of the paranormal world and stuff like that. Because obviously, I'm looking around the room that I'm in now, I can only see the four walls and stuff that I can see at the moment. I can't even see beyond that. I know there's certain things beyond certain doors and that kind of stuff, but until I walk through that door, I don't know whether that I assume that's what it is because that's what I left it at, but it could have changed. There's that element of change, that reality from seeing past that time and space and taking it out of the equation. All of a sudden you get into this theoretical world of anything's possible. And that's
Exactly.
why it gets all a bit weird. But then it's difficult for us to grasp those concepts when we live in a literal or living world where we understand things to be as they're supposed to be, sort of thing. And also when we live in a world where materialistic science is now the foundation of what we all understand. Newton's laws and all that kind of stuff is everything that we understand. So going beyond that or changing it or looking at other possibilities is almost like going, whoa, that's like sacrilege because it's like the new religion.
Yeah, so basically physicists take concepts and move them forward, and then sometimes they change or they recognise gaps because they start questioning things. And this is where we have to get to. This is the point we have to get to in regards to our investigations. Keep questioning, keep researching, keep reading, keep looking at bigger concepts and see if they fit more into your understanding. Open your mind a little bit more. Don't just get boxed into there was a noise in a room and that must mean it's a ghost. Do you know what I mean? Explore more possibilities and don't be afraid of physics. Don't be afraid of biology. Don't be afraid of looking at different concepts and ideas and theories. Keep pushing your boundaries open. Keep spreading that, because that's where your knowledge comes from. That's what's going to make you progress in the field, away from being just a ghost hunter into somebody who becomes a more, I'm not going to use the word expert, but a more of an authority on the subject of the paranormal.
Yeah, because you look at it at different angles. Then you're not rinsing and repeating the standard issue that we've all done over the years, and you become someone who's sought after different areas of the. Good example is Graham Smith. He read the theory by Thomas Fusco. I mean, I don't know whether I 100% agree with Thomas's theory, but there are elements of it that actually do make sense and kind of make it an understanding. But Graham took that theory and he's like, right, okay, that makes sense to me. It has resonance with me. And he went off and he started looking at bits and pieces, and he's created a gadget now. Well, a gadget's probably too small a word. He's created a device that allows him to record data over a certain amount of time, so that he can put it in place and see if an anomaly occurs that is in line with Thomas Fusco's theory. Now that in my mind is where we should all be going. That's what we should all be looking at, things like that, saying, okay, right, I like that idea. I'm going to go and see if that's possible. He's gathering the data and a large amount of data in order to see if he can get more out of it. And so there's things like that to do. I mean, question everything, but question it backwards and forwards is always what I always like to say. Because if you look at it from a spiritual point of view as well as a scientific point of view, because sometimes spiritual elements have a kind of they'll question the science and the science will question the spirituality, and then you can find a balance in between as well, which is why I like talking to people that are more spiritual sometimes as well as people that are a bit more sciencey, because it gives you quite an interesting kind of a balanced frame. Would you agree, Kerry?
I do agree. I think you should continually explore, and if you read a theory, don't be afraid to look into it more. You know, don't get baffled by big words. That's kind of a issue that I have. They start using big words and it starts to dribble out my ears and I lose it. But Ashley came to me the other night. He said, have a look at this, which was the holographic universal theory. And I was like, oh, God, I got in from work. It was late. I was tired. I was thinking, oh, God, here we go. I'll have a quick look. 4 hours later, I got caught up in it, and 4 hours later, I'm thinking, this is really interesting. This opens some doors. This is very, very thought-provoking. And that's kind of how I work, And I'll be honest with you. I honestly thought, oh, God, no, I'm too tired. But it caught my imagination, I suppose. And some of the people I looked at were talking in terminology that I couldn't grasp. So I went through several different physicists, listening to different physicists talk about this theory, and they try and simplify it down and acknowledge that it's very difficult to simplify these terms down. And although they simplify it to our understanding, it's actually a lot more than that. But if they did that, they know that they're going to lose the 99.9% of the population in these ideas and theories, because then no one's going to understand it. So they simplify it down and give it names like the holographic universal theory. So it gives us a way of trying to relate to it. And they do that more than you think they do. And it's about going out there and finding out somebody who you can relate to. I mean, looking at, I love Professor Brian Cox, but he's stated ghosts aren't real. That was to do with the hydrogen collider thingy, wasn't it? He came out and said that quote.
LLC, hydrogen collider, yeah.
But that doesn't stop me from looking at his work and finding it incredibly interesting. And because of the way he puts things, it makes it understandable to me.
Yeah.
Physics,
this
is.
Well, yeah, that's it. Yeah, to be fair, he does do a good job. I mean, he's like one of the premier. Is he BBC's one of their figureheads for like physics and cosmology kind of stuff when they do shows on that. So he is quite good at explaining things to us in terms that we'll understand and stuff like that. Yes, he said that ghosts don't exist categorically and all that kind of stuff, but then they don't exist in his understanding of physics and that kind of stuff, which is fine. But then if you think about that reversely, we don't understand what a ghost is. So he's right.
We can't argue that point.
They can't categorically exist until we understand what they are. Otherwise, they're just a collection of pieces of information that we put together and called it a ghost. But we haven't really described it in terms that gives it, a proper understanding. It's just again back to anecdotal information opposed to actual, mathematical terms. A ghost is, X to the Y to whatever. It's not that. It's just it's Bob's experience or Kerry's or Ashley's experience on such and such occasion, which could be any number of, environmental factors or psychological factors that have put us into that position that we understand there to be a ghost there. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there was actually a discarnate spirit or something there talking to us. It could have just been other elements that we don't understand, which have other names, which aren't ghosts. So he's 100% right. It's like it's very, very clever kind of statement to make, but also not as controversial as people think it is, I don't think.
No, it was taken into a hugely controversial moment, wasn't it, at that time when he said that. But when you look at what he backed that up with, you can't argue that point. Not really. And actually, if you want to listen more about Professor Brian Cox talking about all sorts of issues, including some paranormal issues, he does a podcast himself called The Infinite Monkey Cage on the BBC. It's on. You can go and get it online. Go check it out, because it's I find that absolutely fascinating, listening to the panel of various people talking, and it's very funny as well. It does bring up interesting concepts, and it's very funny. And on that note, we've actually come to the end of the show. Thank you so much for joining me, Ashley, and talking theories with me tonight.
That's all right. Thanks for inviting me on at 1 minute to 9.
He was like, what? I was like, you're coming on a show. He's like, oh no. Don't forget, everybody, I did a live today on the Parasearch Radio group page, giving you a show roundup. Done it today because I've got a lot of work going on this week. I work retail, and you can imagine what retail Christmas is like at the moment. So my hours are being sucked up in the shop. So guys, check that out if you want to find out what's going up. We'll be back live with you tomorrow with Gemma and Joe on the Supernatural show. And don't forget, on the Parasearch Radio group page, we also have a competition for a signed copy of Richard Estep's latest book. Just pop over there, pop your name onto the competition, and then you will be entered into the draw. You have to be a liker of our group page. That's all I need to say. Thank you so much once again for joining me, Ashley. It's been an absolute pleasure. And on that note, we bid you a very farewell.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.